Cade Archer and his friends were overcome with a palpable wave of disgust the moment they witnessed Nia Wallace being named to the cheer squad at Northgate High. In their tightly circumscribed worldview, she was a black girl who had no right to stand among the traditionally white ranks of their cheerleaders, an unwelcome disruption to their established order. And so they resolved to eliminate this perceived intrusion in the only manner their limited imaginations could conjure, through a campaign of relentless attack. But what Cade's arrogant eyes failed to perceive, hidden beneath Nia's serene and unbroken silence, was a foundation of tactical training instilled in her by her father, a Navy SEAL. They saw a lone, vulnerable figure, someone they believed was helpless. They were convinced she would shatter and crumble, just as all of Cade's previous targets had. This assumption was catastrophically, monumentally wrong, and Nia Wallace was poised to deliver a definitive lesson on precisely what unfolds when entitled bullies make the fatal error of underestimating a soldier's daughter. The gymnasium air crackled, thick with a nervous electric energy, as 23 young women stood in a rigid line, awaiting the final cheer team announcements. Nia Wallace was positioned third from the left, her hands held steady and still at her sides, a stark contrast to the frantic hammering rhythm inside her chest. She had flawlessly executed every single routine, hit every precise mark, and held a brilliant smile until her cheeks throbbed with a dull ache throughout the 3 grueling, exhausting days of tryouts. Ladies, every one of you has demonstrated incredible spirit and an unwavering dedication, Coach Davies announced, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. She clutched her clipboard like a protective shield, a barrier between hope and disappointment. This year's Northgate High varsity cheer team will represent our school with immense pride and unparalleled excellence. Nia's gaze swept methodically across the gym, absorbing the vast sea of blonde ponytails and artificially tanned skin that enveloped her. Her eyes then caught a new movement as the football team began to filter in through the large side doors, their practice having just concluded. Cade Archer, the star quarterback, led the pack, his characteristic swagger unmistakable even beneath the sheen of sweat on his practice gear. Ryder Braxton flanked him like a loyal bulldog, his thick muscular arms crossed defiantly over his chest, while Leo Finch trailed a step behind, his entire posture screaming a desperate, yearning need to belong. The following young women have earned their place on this year's squad, Coach Davies continued, her voice steady. She began to read through the list in alphabetical order, and each name announced was met with a chorus of excited squeals and tight congratulatory embraces. Nia Wallace. The 2 words struck her with the force of a lightning bolt. She had done it. She had actually truly made it. A strange mix of sounds erupted around her, a blend of genuine congratulations interwoven with threads of barely disguised surprise from some of the other girls. Nia maintained a controlled, professional expression, her features a placid mask, just as her father had rigorously taught her. From the other side of the gym, she felt a heavy, intense gaze fixed upon her. Cade Archer was staring, his jaw clenched into a tight, hard knot. He leaned over, his lips moving as he whispered something venomous into Ryder's ear, who responded by shaking his head with a look of pure disgust. Leo just appeared confused, his eyes darting between his friends, his expression a mirror of their lead. "Congratulations to our new Ravens." Coach Davies clapped, her smile wide. "Team meeting tomorrow afternoon after school. We have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us before homecoming." As the chaotic celebration swirled and continued around her, Nia calmly gathered her gym bag and made her way toward the exit. She noted that the football players had strategically positioned themselves near the doors, a convenient coincidence that caused her pulse to quicken its rhythm. "Excuse me," she said, her voice polite but firm, as she attempted to pass. Cade shifted his body slightly to the right, not quite blocking her path entirely, but making it unequivocally clear that she would have to squeeze by him to acknowledge his physical dominance. "So, you're the newest addition to our cheer squad," he stated, his tone dripping with condescension. That's right, Nia replied, meeting his gaze directly, her own eyes unflinching. An interesting choice by Coach Davies, Ryder's voice boomed, carrying just enough volume for the nearby students to overhear. Very progressive. I earned my spot, the same as everyone else, Nia responded evenly, her voice a calm counterpoint to his aggression. Leo shifted uncomfortably on his feet but remained silent as Cade let a slow smile spread across his face. It was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes, cold and empty. "Oh, I'm sure you did," he purred. "It's just, our fans have certain expectations about what their cheerleaders are supposed to look like." The words hung in the air like a toxic smoke, thick and suffocating. Other students slowed their conversations, their heads turning, sensing the rising tension. "And what exactly should they look like?" Nia asked, her voice remaining miraculously steady despite the heat that was building in her chest, a slow burn of anger. "You know," Cade shrugged, a picture of feigned nonchalance. "Traditional. The kind of girls who truly represent Raven pride. Blonde hair, school spirit, the whole package. Like Barbie dolls." Nia tilted her head slightly, a subtle gesture of challenge. Ryder stepped forward, invading her personal space. "Like girls who belong here. Girls who understand what this school is really about." "I understand perfectly," Nia said, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. "This school is about excellence, academics, and representing our community with pride, and that is exactly what I intend to do." Cade's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before it returned, colder than before. "We'll see about that. The football season is a long road. Lots of games, lots of pressure. Not everyone is cut out for it. Good thing I am," she stated. And then she pushed past them without uttering another word, feeling the burn of their stares on her back. Meanwhile, the three boys watched her walk away, their expressions darkening as the last of the other students filtered past them toward the sprawling parking lot. "Are you kidding me right now?" Cade's voice dropped to a low, conspiratorial growl, meant only for his two friends. "They actually put her on the squad." Ryder spat contemptuously toward a nearby trash can. "This is exactly the kind of garbage that's ruining our school." "What's next? They gonna make us kneel for the anthem too, dude?" "What if she's one of those girls who thinks she's better than everyone?" Leo finally spoke up, his voice uncertain but straining to match the aggressive energy of his friends. "Like acts all smart and stuff." "Oh, she definitely thinks she's something special," Cade replied, his jaw clenching and unclenching. "Did you see the way she looked at us? Like we were the problem." Ryder's face contorted with disgust. "I'm not cheering next to that. My dad's going to lose his mind when he finds out they put some diversity hire on the squad instead of Haley Richmond. Haley's been waiting 2 years for this." "It's not right, man." Cade shook his head slowly. "Our fans don't want to see that representing our school. They want real Raven girls, not some—" He let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished, but his meaning was perfectly clear to his friends. Leo nodded eagerly, desperate to be included. "Yeah, exactly. Like, what are people going to think when they see our cheerleaders? This isn't that kind of school." "Well, she's about to find out what kind of school this really is," Ryder said, cracking his knuckles with a sharp, menacing sound. "Football season's going to be real educational for her." Cade's cold, calculating smile returned. "Oh yeah, real educational." The harassment began small, with incidents almost innocent enough to be dismissed as mere coincidence. On Monday morning, Nia arrived at her locker to find it was slightly ajar. Her combination lock hung open, and she could see that someone had deliberately rearranged her books. Nothing was missing, just disturbed. She glanced around the bustling hallway, her eyes briefly locking with Cade Archer's 3 lockers down. He was in the middle of a conversation with some sophomore girl, but his attention kept drifting back to Nia. "Weird," she muttered to herself, methodically reorganizing her textbooks. By third period, the news about the new cheer roster had spread like wildfire. Nia could feel the weight of the stairs in every hallway she walked down. She could hear the whispered conversations that would abruptly cease the moment she passed by. Some students offered encouraging smiles, but many others just looked confused, as if she were a puzzle they couldn't possibly solve. "Hey, Nia!" Chloe Bennett, one of the senior cheerleaders, caught up with her after English class. I'm so excited you made the team. We're going to have such an amazing season. Thanks, Chloe. I can't wait to get started. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong, okay? You earned this, just like the rest of us. The very fact that Chloe felt the need to say it only confirmed what Nia already suspected. People were talking. During lunch, she sat with her usual group of friends from the Honor Society when Ryder Braxton deliberately walked past their table. His shoulder slammed into her chair, hard enough to jolt her backward. "Oops," he said without stopping or even glancing back. "Sorry about that." Her friend Jessica frowned. "That was weird. Ryder's never that clumsy." "Maybe he's just having an off day," Nia replied, but she was already cataloging the incident in her mind, filing it away. The real message, however, was delivered during 7th period study hall. Nia pulled out her phone to check the time and discovered a notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged her in a post. The image was a screenshot of the school's official announcement about the new cheer team, with Nia's name circled in a garish, angry red. The caption read, "Guess Northgate's going woke now. Rip real Raven pride. Not my cheerleader." The post had already garnered 37 likes and a handful of comments that made her stomach churn. Most were carefully worded to avoid outright slurs, but the underlying message was crystal clear. "Diversity hire much? She doesn't even look like she belongs here." There goes the neighborhood. Nia took screenshots of everything before she blocked the account, which belonged to someone named Raven Pride 2024, obviously a fake profile. Her hands were shaking slightly as she put her phone away. That afternoon at cheer practice, the tension in the air was palpable. Coach Davies ran them through basic routines, but Nia could feel the sideways glances from some of her teammates. Chloe and a few others were genuinely welcoming, but the rest seemed to be waiting, watching to see what would happen next. "All right, ladies, let's run through the homecoming routine one more time," Coach Davies called out. "Nia, you'll be in the back row for now, until you learn all the formations." As they lined up, Paige Donovan, a junior with perfectly curled blonde hair, positioned herself directly in front of Nia. Throughout the routine, she kept stepping backward ever so slightly, forcing Nia to constantly adjust her spacing to avoid a collision. "Sorry," Paige would whisper sweetly each time, still getting used to the new formation. By the end of practice, Nia had been stepped on twice and elbowed once during a complicated turn sequence. All accidents, of course, according to Paige's cloying, apologetic smile. Walking to her car afterward, Nia noticed the football team finishing their own practice on the adjacent field. Kate Archer was deep in conversation with Coach Reynolds. Both of them kept glancing over toward the parking lot where the cheerleaders were loading their gear. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How was the first practice, Warrior?" "Fine," she typed back, then immediately deleted it. "Good learning the routines. Pick you up for dinner? Want to hear all about it? I'll drive myself home. See you there." That evening, sitting across from her father at their kitchen table, Nia picked listlessly at her grilled chicken while Commander Wallace studied her with the same intense, penetrating focus that had made him such an effective military leader. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, his voice calm. "Just tired. New team, lots to learn." "Uh-huh." He carefully set down his fork. "And how are your new teammates treating you?" Nia hesitated. Her father had taught her to always be honest about threats, but she was also keenly aware of his fierce, protective instincts. "Most of them are fine. There's always an adjustment period." "What about the ones who aren't fine?" She looked up sharply. "What makes you think—" "Nia." His voice carried the immense patience of someone who had interrogated enemy combatants. "I didn't raise you to lie to me. Especially not about your safety. What's happening?" She sighed, pulling out her phone and showing him the Instagram post. His expression darkened ominously as he read through the venomous comments. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble. "Anonymous posts, accidents at practice, little territorial games. They're testing you, seeing how you'll respond. So, what do I do?" "Document everything," he instructed. "Screenshots, witnesses, times, and dates. But don't react. Not yet. Let them show their hand. And if it escalates?" Commander Wallace's smile was as thin and sharp as a razor. "Then we'll discuss your options. But for now, you stay alert, and you stay smart." They picked the wrong girl to intimidate. As Nia headed upstairs to work on her homework, she didn't notice the black pickup truck that had been parked across the street for the past hour, or the three shadowy figures inside watching her house with a steadily growing resentment. Tomorrow would bring a new set of challenges, and Cade Archer was already meticulously planning his next move. The harassment escalated dramatically over the next 2 weeks, like floodwater building relentlessly behind a cracking dam. On Tuesday morning, Nia discovered her cheer shoes were missing from her gym locker. She had left them there after practice the previous night, and now they were simply gone. Coach Davies had to lend her an old, worn-out pair that were 2 sizes too big, making her feel clumsy and conspicuous. "That's strange," Chloe said, her brow furrowed in a frown. "Who would take someone's shoes?" "Maybe they fell out," Paige suggested, with a saccharine display of fake concern. "These old lockers are so unreliable." Nia said nothing, but she couldn't help but notice Cade Archer smirking at her oversized shoes during their shared chemistry class. Wednesday brought a new sickening low. Someone had left a banana on the windshield of her car, accompanied by a small, cruelly scrawled note, "Monkey see, monkey do." Nia crumpled the piece of paper in her fist and threw both items into the nearest trash can, but her hands shook with a potent, simmering rage as she drove home. On Thursday, she arrived at her locker to find it had been vandalized. Someone had used a sharp object to scratch the words, "Go home," deep into the metal door. When she reported the incident to Principal Croft, he sighed heavily, a portrait of weary resignation. "I'll have maintenance look at it, but vandalism is hard to prove without any witnesses," he said, his tone dismissive. "Are you sure you want to make a big deal out of this?" "Sometimes it's better to just let these things blow over." "So I should just accept someone destroying school property because of my race?" "Now, Nia, let's not jump to conclusions about motivation. What other motivation could there possibly be?" Principal Croft shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I'll have a talk with some of the students, see what I can find out. In the meantime, maybe just try to keep a low profile." That afternoon, the real, unambiguous message was delivered during lunch. Nia was walking past the football table when Ryder Braxton deliberately stuck his foot out into her path. She stumbled but managed to catch herself before she fell completely. "Watch where you're going," he said loudly, his voice booming across the cafeteria, loud enough for half the student body to hear. "You tripped me." Tyler stood up, his full 6'3" frame towering over her menacingly. "You calling me a liar?" The bustling cafeteria fell silent. Cade Archer and Leo Finch flanked Ryder, creating an imposing wall of Letterman jackets. "I'm saying you need to move your foot," Nia replied evenly, her voice a calm island in the sudden sea of silence. "Or what?" Cade stepped forward, a predatory glint in his eyes. "You going to run crying to Daddy? Oh, wait. I heard he's some kind of military guy. Must be embarrassing having a daughter who can't even handle high school." The words struck her like a physical slap. Nia felt a hot flush of heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice perfectly steady. "At least my father taught me how to be a decent human being." Ryder's face flushed a deep, angry red. "You think you're better than us? Walking around here like you own the place? I think I belong here as much as anyone else." "No." Leo finally spoke up, his voice shaky, but filled with a desperate determination to impress his friends. "You really don't." Several students had already pulled out their phones, sensing the escalating drama. Nia quickly realized she was outnumbered and surrounded, with dozens of cameras potentially recording her impending humiliation. "We'll see about that," she said, quietly, and then she turned and walked away. Behind her, she heard Cade's voice carry clearly across the silent cafeteria. "Yeah, walk away. That's what you people do best." The phrase, "you people," echoed in her head, a venomous refrain for the rest of the day. Friday brought the incident that changed everything. It was game day, and the entire school was buzzing with a palpable excitement for the homecoming matchup against their fiercest rivals. Nia had finally learned the routines well enough to be moved up to the second row. And despite everything that had happened, she felt a genuine thrill of anticipation about performing in front of the massive crowd. She was walking toward the gym for the final preparations when she noticed the puddle. Recent rain had created a muddy, soupy depression right outside the main entrance, about 3 feet wide and 6 inches deep. Most students were walking around it without a second thought. Nia was busy texting her father about pickup arrangements when she heard the sound of urgent footsteps behind her. She looked up from her phone just as Cade Archer grabbed her left arm in a vice-like grip. "Hey, new girl, got a message for you." Before she could even begin to react, Ryder Braxton seized her right arm while Leo Mills positioned himself strategically to block the view from the parking lot. "What are you doing?" Nia demanded, trying to pull her arms free. "Teaching you a lesson about knowing your place," Cade snarled, his face a mask of contempt. They shoved her backward, forcing her directly toward the puddle. Nia tried to dig her heels in, but her sneakers couldn't find any purchase on the wet, slippery concrete. "Stop it!" she yelled, her voice loud enough that several students turned to look in their direction. "Oops," Ryder said with mock surprise as they gave her one final powerful push. Nia hit the muddy water hard, the impact jarring her entire body. Her uniform skirt tore on a sharp piece of broken concrete that had been hidden beneath the murky surface. Cold, filthy water soaked instantly through her clothes as she scrambled to get up. The 3 boys stood over her, no longer bothering to hide their smug satisfaction. "Looks like you slipped," Cade said loudly for the benefit of the growing audience. "How clumsy." Several of her fellow cheerleaders had come outside, drawn by the commotion. Chloe gasped and rushed forward. "Oh my God, Nia, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Nia managed to say, but her voice cracked with the effort. Mud streaked her face and arms, and her torn uniform exposed her dignity, along with her skin. Paige Donovan immediately pulled out her phone. "This is so going on Instagram." Epic fail. "Don't you dare!" Chloe snapped, but Nia knew it was already too late. By tonight, half the school would have seen the video of her humiliation. The football players were already walking away, high-fiving each other as if they had just scored the winning touchdown. "Nice uniform," Ryder called over his shoulder. "Really brings out your eyes," Cade laughed. "Maybe now you'll think twice about where you belong." Nia sat in the muddy water for another few seconds. Not because she couldn't get up, but because she needed to memorize this exact moment. The feeling of the cold mud seeping through her clothes, the sound of their cruel laughter, the bitter taste of humiliation in her mouth, and most importantly, the absolute, unshakable certainty that this could never, ever happen again. Chloe helped her to her feet, offering a flurry of tissues and apologies, but Nia barely heard her. She was thinking about her father's voice. Sometimes you have to create your own justice when the system fails you. Tonight she would tell him everything. And tomorrow the real fight would begin. Nia sat in her car in the school parking lot for 20 long minutes after the game, still wearing her muddy, torn uniform. The Ravens had won 28-14, and she could hear the distant echoes of celebration coming from the fieldhouse. But the victory felt hollow, meaningless. She had watched the entire game from the sidelines, dressed in a borrowed uniform that hung loose and ill-fitting on her frame, a constant, tangible reminder of her humiliation. Her phone buzzed incessantly with texts. Some were supportive, from Chloe and her friends in the Honor Society, while others were links to social media posts that made her stomach turn. The video of her being shoved into the puddle had already been shared 43 times, with captions like, "Diversity hire gets a reality check," and "When keeping it real goes wrong." Finally, she put the car in drive and headed home. Commander Wallace was waiting in the kitchen when she walked through the door, still in her stained and ruined uniform. He took one long look at her and deliberately set down his coffee mug with a quiet, precise click. What happened? Nia had planned to ease into the conversation, to perhaps start with the minor incidents and work her way up to what had happened today. But seeing her father's controlled, impassive expression, the very same look he'd worn when briefing his SEAL team before dangerous missions, she found herself telling him everything at once. 3 football players have been harassing me since I made the team. Cade Archer, Ryder Braxton, and Leo Finch. It started with comments about how I don't belong. Then it was missing shoes, a vandalized locker, social media posts. Today, they shoved me into a mud puddle in front of half the cheer squad and tore my uniform. Her father listened without a single interruption, his face growing progressively darker with each word she spoke. When she finally finished, a heavy silence stretched between them for several long, charged heartbeats. "Show me the social media posts," he said quietly. Nia handed over her phone. Commander Wallace scrolled through the comments, his jaw tightening with each venomous swipe of his thumb. "And the school's response? Principal Croft told me to keep a low profile and just let it blow over." Something dangerous flickered deep in her father's eyes. "Did he now?" "Dad, I know what you're thinking, but what am I thinking?" "That you want to go to the school and handle this yourself. But that'll just make things worse for me. They'll say I can't fight my own battles." Commander Wallace studied his daughter with a newfound respect. "You're right. But this cannot continue. I know. That's why I need you to teach me." "Teach you what?" Nia met his gaze directly, her own eyes filled with a cold determination. "Everything. How to defend myself, how to fight back, how to make sure this never, ever happens again." Her father was quiet for a long moment, carefully weighing her words. "Physical confrontation should always be the absolute last resort, Nia. Once you cross that line, they already crossed it. They put their hands on me today." "Fair point." He leaned back in his chair. "But there are other ways to handle bullies." "Strategic ways." "Ways that leave them no room to claim victimhood." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're David Wallace's daughter. You're smarter than those boys. You're more disciplined, and you have something they don't." "What's that?" "Patience, and a father who spent 20 years learning how to neutralize threats." His smile was as cold as winter steel. "Tell me everything you know about them. Their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. We're going to plan this like a military operation." Meanwhile, across town at Kate Archer's house, the 3 football players were celebrating their victory in more ways than one. "Did you see her face when she hit that water?" Leo laughed, taking another long drink from a stolen beer. "Priceless. The best part was watching her try to act tough afterward," Ryder added, "like she wasn't completely and totally humiliated." Cade sat back in his expensive gaming chair, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. That should send the message. She doesn't belong here, and we're not going to pretend she does. "Think she'll quit the team?" Leo asked hopefully. "No," Ryder shook his head. "Girls like her are stubborn. She'll probably double down, try to prove something." "Then we'll just have to get more creative," Cade said, a cruel glint in his eye. "Can't have her thinking she can just ignore us." "What if she tells someone? Like her parents or whatever?" Leo's voice carried a faint note of worry. Ryder snorted with derision. "Tell them what? That she's clumsy and fell in a puddle? We didn't do anything wrong. Just 3 guys walking to practice who happened to be nearby when she tripped." "Exactly," Kate agreed. "And even if she tries to make something of it, who's going to believe her over us? My dad practically built the new gymnasium. Ryder's dad is on the school board. We're Raven's royalty, and she's—" He shrugged. "Not," Leo nodded eagerly. "Plus, Coach Reynolds loves us. Principal Croft isn't going to mess with the football program over some diversity cheerleader having an attitude problem." "Speaking of which," Ryder said, pulling out his phone, "check this out." He showed them a group text thread with several other football players and their girlfriends. The video of Nia's humiliation was making the rounds, with commentary that grew cruder and more vicious with each share. "Tommy Williams said his girlfriend might quit the team if they don't do something about the problem," Ryder reported with a smirk. "Apparently, some of the other girls are getting uncomfortable." "Good," Cade said. "Let them be uncomfortable. Maybe they'll pressure Coach Davies to make some roster changes." "What if that doesn't work?" Leo asked. Cade's expression hardened. "Then we escalate. We make her so miserable she has no choice but to transfer schools." "How far are we talking?" Ryder leaned forward, clearly interested. "As far as it takes. This is our school, our team, our traditions. I'm not letting some outsider ruin what we built here." Back at the Wallace house, a father and daughter were deep in strategic planning. "The key to any successful operation is intelligence gathering," Commander Wallace explained, his voice low and serious. "You need to know your targets better than they know themselves. What motivates them? What scares them? What would hurt them the most?" "Kate Archer is the leader," Nia said immediately. "Star quarterback, rich family. His dad owns Archer Construction. They built half the buildings in town. Vulnerabilities? He's being recruited by several major colleges. Football is everything to him. Good. What about the others? Ryder Braxton. His father is on the school board. Ryder's not as smart as Cade, but he's more violent. Scholarship kid, I think. Football is his only ticket out. And the third one? Leo Finch, a follower, not a leader. Desperate to fit in with the other two. Parents are divorced. Lives with his mom. Commander Wallace nodded approvingly. You've been paying attention. Now lesson 1, never attack when your enemy expects it. They're feeling confident right now, untouchable. That's when they make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that leave evidence. The kind that expose them for what they really are. He stood up. But first, we need to make sure you can protect yourself if this gets physical again. You mean fight training? I mean survival training. There's a difference. His expression grew deadly serious. What happened today was just the beginning, Nia. They're going to escalate because you didn't break. Are you prepared for that? Nia thought about the cold mud, the cruel laughter, the cameras recording her humiliation. I'm prepared for whatever it takes. Then we start tomorrow. But remember, we're not just teaching you to fight. We're teaching you to win. Saturday morning brought Nia's first lesson in what her father called tactical awareness. They started at 6 a.m. sharp in the basement, which Commander Wallace had converted into a private training space years ago. Heavy punching bags hung from reinforced ceiling beams, and thick, cushioned mats covered the entire concrete floor. Forget everything you think you know about fighting, he began, circling her slowly like a predator. Movies, TV shows, video games. They're all garbage. Real combat is about efficiency, not entertainment. What do you mean? I mean, you don't waste energy on fancy moves or dramatic gestures. You identify the threat, you neutralize it, and you get out. 3 seconds or less. He moved behind a punching bag, demonstrating a series of precise, brutal strikes. Throat strike to crush the windpipe. Knee to the solar plexus to drop them. Heel stomp to break the instep so they can't chase you. Nia watched intently, memorizing the fluid, economical movements. But before any of that you observe, you learn their patterns, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Sun Tzu said, "The supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting." So I study them first. You study everything. Where they go when they go there, who they talk to, what they care about. Information is power, and power is leverage. They spent the next hour drilling basic defensive moves, how to break a grab, how to create distance, how to strike effectively despite her smaller size. Nia's muscles burned with a fiery ache, but she pushed through the discomfort, her focus absolute. Your advantage isn't strength, her father explained. It's speed, intelligence, and the element of surprise. They expect you to be a victim. You must use that assumption against them. By 8 a.m., Nia was exhausted but felt strangely energized. Her father handed her a water bottle and a fresh notebook. Your homework starts now. I want detailed intelligence on all 3 targets. Where they park, what routes they take between classes, who they spend time with, everything. How do I do that without being obvious? Commander Wallace smiled. You learn to be invisible. Watch from a distance. Listen to conversations. Become part of the background, like a spy. Exactly like a spy. On Monday morning, Nia began her reconnaissance mission. She arrived at school 30 minutes early, positioning herself in the library at a table with a clear, unobstructed view of the student parking lot. Cade Archer pulled up in his black Dodge Challenger at exactly 7:47 a.m., parking in the same reserved spot near the gym entrance. Ryder Braxton arrived 3 minutes later in a beat-up Ford truck, parking 2 rows back. Leo Finch came last, dropped off by his mother in a silver Honda Civic. During lunch, she sat with her back to the football table, but used her phone's camera in selfie mode to covertly record their conversation patterns. Cade dominated most discussions. Ryder provided aggressive, often crude commentary, and Leo mostly just laughed at inappropriate moments. Between classes, she meticulously mapped their routes. Cade took the long way around to avoid the crowded main hallways. Ryder cut through the arts hallway, where teachers rarely patrolled, and Leo simply followed whichever of his 2 friends was closest at any given moment. After 3 days of intense observation, she had 15 pages of detailed notes. "Excellent work," her father said that evening, carefully reviewing her intelligence. "Now what have you learned about their vulnerabilities?" Cade's entire identity is built around football and his reputation. He's being recruited by State University and Alabama. Tyler's family has money problems. I overheard him arguing with his girlfriend about not being able to afford homecoming dinner. And Leo, he's just desperate to belong somewhere. Good. Now what would hurt each of them the most? Nia considered this carefully. Cade would be devastated if his college prospects disappeared. Ryder needs his football scholarship or he can't afford college at all. And Leo would crumble if the other two rejected him. And how might their college prospects disappear? If they got in serious trouble, like arrested trouble, Commander Wallace nodded approvingly. Or if evidence surfaced of behavior that college recruiters find completely unacceptable. What kind of evidence? That depends on what they're hiding. Everyone has secrets, Nia. The trick is finding them. Meanwhile, the three boys grew bolder and more brazen in their harassment. Convinced that Nia's continued silent presence meant she was weak, they began planning something bigger, something more permanent than mud puddles and stolen shoes. Back at home that evening, Nia was updating her intelligence files when her father knocked on her bedroom door. "How's the reconnaissance going?" "Good. I think I understand their dynamic now. Cade's the strategic thinker, Ryder's the enforcer, and Leo's the weak link. Weak links can be useful. They're often the first to break under pressure." "Dad," Nia looked up from her notebook, "what if they escalate before I'm ready to fight back?" Commander Washington's expression grew serious. "Then you remember what I taught you about survival. You protect yourself first, and you worry about strategy second. But from what you've observed, what do you think their next move will be?" Nia considered everything she'd learned about their patterns, their personalities, their motivations. Something bigger than the puddle incident? They want me to quit, so they'll try to humiliate me in a way that can't be ignored or dismissed. Then we'd better accelerate your training. Tomorrow we start Phase 2. What's Phase 2? Her father's smile was as sharp as a blade, learning how to turn their strengths into weaknesses. Phase 1 targets Cade Archer, Commander Wallace explained over breakfast on Thursday morning. He's the leader, so taking him down sends a powerful message to the others. How? Her father slid a manila folder across the kitchen table. Inside were photocopies of prescription bottles and a small clear plastic bag containing a handful of white pills. "Where did you get these?" Nia asked, a surge of alarm rising within her. "The nurse's office has remarkably poor security. These are expired anxiety medications that were supposed to be disposed of properly." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "The bottles still have patient information on them, but the names have been carefully obscured. You want me to plant drugs in his truck?" "I want you to create a situation where Cade Archer faces real, tangible consequences for the very first time in his privileged life. College scouts don't recruit students with drug possession charges on their records." Nia stared at the pills, feeling the immense weight of the decision settle upon her. This could ruin his entire future, just like he's trying to ruin yours. "The difference is, you didn't start this war." "But what if—" "Nia," her father's voice was gentle but firm, "these boys shoved you into a mud puddle and humiliated you in front of your peers. They've made it abundantly clear that they won't stop until you're gone. Sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to hit them where it hurts the most." She nodded slowly, tucking the folder into her backpack. On Friday afternoon, Nia waited in the parking lot after school, positioned strategically behind a large van that gave her a clear view of Cade's challenger. Most of the students had already left, but football practice wouldn't start for another 30 minutes. It was the perfect window of opportunity. Cade's truck sat alone in the premium parking spots reserved for senior athletes. Nia had watched him for a week and knew his routine perfectly. He always went to the weight room before practice, leaving his truck unlocked because, in his world, nobody would be stupid enough to mess with it. She approached the truck casually, as if she were simply walking to her own car parked 3 rows away. When she was absolutely certain no one was watching, she quickly and quietly opened the passenger door of the Challenger. The truck's interior smelled of expensive cologne and a cloying arrogance. Nia slipped the prescription bottle under the passenger seat, positioning it so that it would be visible to anyone who looked closely, but not immediately obvious. The loose pills went into the center console, scattered among spare change and old, crumpled receipts. Her hands were shaking as she gently closed the door and walked away without looking back. 2 hours later, during football practice, an anonymous tip was called into the school's drug hotline. The caller reported seeing suspicious activity around Cade Archer's vehicle and suggested that someone should investigate before the student drove home under the influence. Principal Croft and the school resource officer, Deputy Collins, approached Cade during practice. "Archer, we need to search your vehicle," Deputy Collins announced, his voice authoritative. "What? Why?" Cade's usual confidence faltered for the first time since Nia had known him. "We received an anonymous tip about drug activity. It's probably nothing, but we have to check." Cade's teammates began to gather around, drawn by the commotion. Coach Reynolds jogged over from the other end of the field. "What's the problem here?" "Just a routine search, Coach. Should only take a few minutes." But it didn't take just a few minutes. Deputy Collins found the prescription bottle almost immediately, and the loose pills in the console sealed Cade's fate. "Whose prescription is this?" the deputy asked, holding up the bottle with the obscured label. "I don't know. I've never seen that before in my life." Cade's voice cracked with rising panic. "So you're saying someone planted drugs in your unlocked truck?" "Yes, maybe. I don't know how they got there." Principal Croft sighed heavily. "Cade, this is serious. These appear to be controlled substances. I'm not using drugs. Ask anyone. Test me right now. That's not the issue. Possession is possession, regardless of whether you consume them." Coach Reynolds stepped forward, his face a mask of concern. "Now hold on, Principal Croft. Cade's one of our best players. There has to be some kind of mistake. Coach, I have to follow protocol. Cade, I'm suspending you pending a full investigation. Deputy Collins will handle the legal aspects." The color drained completely from Cade's face. "Suspended? But we have playoffs coming up. College scouts are coming to watch." "Should have thought about that before you brought these to school," Deputy Collins said, carefully placing the evidence in a sealed plastic bag. "This is insane. Someone's setting me up." "Who would do that?" Principal Croft asked. Cade's eyes darted around the circle of faces surrounding him, his teammates, his coaches, the school officials. For the first time he looked genuinely, utterly frightened. I don't know, but this isn't mine." From the bleachers, where she was stretching with the rest of the cheer squad, Nia watched the entire scene unfold. Chloe leaned over and whispered, "What do you think is happening?" "Looks like Cade's in trouble," Nia replied, keeping her voice perfectly neutral. "Drug trouble, from what I can hear? That's crazy. Cade doesn't seem like the type." "You never really know people," Nia said quietly. Across the field, Cade was being led away from practice in handcuffs. Ryder Braxton and Leo Finch watched in stunned, horrified silence as their leader was placed in the back of a police cruiser. "This is messed up," Ryder muttered. "Cade doesn't do that stuff." "Maybe someone really did plant them," Leo said nervously. "Who would do that?" Leo's eyes found Nia on the sidelines. She was going through the cheer motions with the rest of the squad, seemingly oblivious to the high drama unfolding on the football field. "I don't know," he said slowly. "But Cade's made a lot of enemies lately." That evening, the local news reported the arrest of a star high school quarterback on drug possession charges. Cade's father hired an expensive lawyer within hours, but the damage was already done. State University officially withdrew their recruitment offer that night, and Alabama followed suit the next morning. At the Wallace house, Nia and her father watched the news coverage over dinner. "Phase 1 complete," Commander Wallace said quietly. "I should feel good about this," Nia said, pushing food around her plate with her fork. "But I just feel empty. That's normal. Justice isn't always satisfying in the moment. But ask yourself this. How many other students won't be bullied because Cade Archer learned there are consequences to his actions?" Nia nodded, thinking about all the other kids who might now avoid the kind of humiliation she had been forced to endure. "What's phase 2? Ryder Braxton. And this time, we're going to let him destroy himself." Cade's arrest sent shockwaves through the halls of Northgate High. By Monday morning, Everyone knew that the star quarterback was facing serious criminal charges and had lost his college scholarships. The football team looked shell-shocked and defeated, and Ryder Braxton had stepped into the leadership vacuum with a barely contained, simmering rage. "This is all wrong," Ryder said loudly during lunch, his voice carrying across the entire cafeteria. "Cade doesn't do that stuff. Someone set him up." His girlfriend Haley rubbed his shoulder soothingly. "Maybe the charges won't stick. Maybe he'll get his scholarships back." "No way. Colleges don't take chances on players with drug records." Ryder's fist clenched tightly around his sandwich. "Someone destroyed his life, and I'm going to find out who." Nia sat 3 tables away, eating her lunch quietly while listening intently to every word. She could feel Ryder's angry eyes scanning the cafeteria, searching for suspects, for someone to blame. That afternoon, Commander Wallace reviewed the intelligence files on Ryder Braxton. "Family's struggling financially," he noted. "Father works construction, mother's a part-time secretary. Ryder needs that football scholarship, or he's looking at community college and a mountain of student loans. So we target his scholarship chances too," Nia concluded. Her father nodded grimly. "But Ryder's different from Cade. He's not entitled. He's desperate. And desperate people are more dangerous." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ryder's the type who will escalate to violence when he's cornered. We need to be very careful how we handle this." He pulled out a small vaping device and several small sealed bags. "Your intelligence gathering paid off. Ryder's been selling vapes to underclassmen behind the gym." Nia stared at the evidence. "How did you—" "I followed him yesterday after school. Watched him make 3 separate sales to freshman students. $50 each for devices that cost him $20 online. So he's already breaking the law." "Exactly. We don't need to plant evidence this time. We just need to make sure the right people find out what he's already doing." Nia felt conflicted. "Dad, what if this ruins his whole future? His family really needs that scholarship money." Commander Wallace's expression grew serious. "Nia, this is the hardest part of any operation, questioning whether your actions are justified. But remember what Ryder did to you. Remember how he laughed when you were covered in mud?" "I know, but—" "And remember that he's been selling nicotine to 14-year-olds for profit. Ryder Braxton made his choices long before we ever got involved." That evening, Nia wrestled with the decision. She thought about Ryder's desperation, his family's financial struggles, the way he'd looked when Cade was arrested. But then she remembered his hands grabbing her arms, his sneering voice saying, "You people!" She remembered the sound of his laughter as she sat in that cold, filthy puddle of mud. On Tuesday afternoon, she made her choice. During Ryder's usual selling time behind the gym, Nia positioned herself in the nearby art building, her phone's camera ready. She watched Ryder complete 2 separate transactions with freshman boys, clearly exchanging money for vaping devices. She recorded everything. On Wednesday morning, she anonymously submitted the video to Principal Croft's office, along with screenshots showing Ryder's Venmo transactions with timestamps that matched the video evidence perfectly. The confrontation happened during 3rd period chemistry. Principal Croft and Deputy Collins pulled Ryder out of class, and 20 minutes later, they were searching his locker. They found 12 vaping devices, small bags of nicotine pods, and nearly $300 in cash wrapped in a rubber band. Ryder's protests echoed down the hallway. "This is a setup. Someone's targeting our team." "Mr. Braxton, we have video evidence of you selling these devices to minors," Principal Croft replied firmly. "This isn't a setup. This is you being held accountable. You don't understand. Your family needed you to make better choices. You're suspended pending expulsion hearings. The police will handle the criminal charges for distributing nicotine products to minors." By lunch, the news had spread like wildfire throughout the school. Ryder Braxton, the linebacker being actively recruited by 3 state universities, was now facing criminal charges and expulsion. Haley found Nia at her locker after school. "Did you hear about Ryder?" "Yeah, it's all over the school. Pretty shocking. He's saying someone set him up, that someone's targeting the football players." Haley studied Nia's face carefully. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Nia met her gaze steadily. "Why would I know anything about Ryder's illegal business?" "I don't know. It's just weird timing with Cade getting arrested and now this. Maybe they're just not as perfect as everyone thought they were. Haley's expression hardened. Ryder's going to lose everything because of this. The words hit Nia harder than she had expected. She thought about Ryder's desperate face, his family's financial struggles, the devastating ripple effects of her actions. That's really sad, she said quietly. But Ryder made his own choices. As Haley walked away, Nia felt the immense weight of what she had done. Justice, her father had said, wasn't always satisfying. Sometimes it just felt heavy. But there was still one more target to handle. And Leo Finch was already starting to crack under the pressure. With Cade expelled and Ryder facing criminal charges, Leo Finch had reached his breaking point. On Tuesday evening, he made the calls that would change everything. "We need to meet," he told Cade over the phone. "All three of us. I figured out who's been doing this to us." "Doing what to us?" Cade's voice was bitter, strained from his house arrest. "Come on, Cade, you really think it's a coincidence that we all got busted right after we messed with that black cheerleader?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You think she's behind this?" "I know she is. Think about it. First, you get arrested for drugs right after we pushed her in the mud. Then Ryder gets caught selling vapes. Someone's been watching us, gathering evidence." "That's impossible." "She's just some high school girl." "Is she? You ever notice how she never fights back? How she just takes everything we do with that calm look on her face? Like she's planning something?" Another long pause. "Meet me at Ryder's house in an hour. I'll figure out how to get there without my parents knowing." An hour later, the three boys sat in Ryder's garage, their usual swagger completely replaced by a volatile mixture of fear and rage. "This is insane," Ryder said after Leo laid out his theory. "You're saying some cheerleader masterminded our downfall?" "I'm saying someone did, and she's the only person with a motive," Leo replied. "Think about it. Who else would want to destroy us?" Cade leaned forward, his expression dark. "Even if you're right, what are we supposed to do about it? I'm under house arrest, Ryder's facing charges, and you're about to be expelled." "That's exactly why we need to handle this," Leo said, his voice gaining confidence as desperation made him bold. "If she's been playing games with us, then it's time to show her what happens when you mess with the wrong people." "What are you talking about?" Ryder asked. "I'm talking about ending this. We find her, corner her somewhere private, and we get some answers." "And then what?" Cade's voice was dangerously quiet. Leo's eyes glittered with a malicious light. "Then we make sure she understands that some battles aren't worth fighting." Ryder nodded slowly. "I like it. She wants to play dirty? Let's show her how dirty we can get." "This is our chance to take back control," Leo continued, feeding off their growing anger. "She thinks she's smart, thinks she can destroy our lives and get away with it. It's time to teach her that actions have consequences." Cade pulled out his phone. "First, we need to know where she lives. We can't corner her at school with all the cameras and witnesses." "How do we find that out?" Leo asked. "Easy, the school directory has everyone's addresses for emergency contacts." Ryder grabbed his laptop. "My mom still has access to the parent portal from when she was the PTA treasurer." 20 minutes later, they had what they needed. 1247 Maple Street, a quiet residential neighborhood about 15 minutes from the school. "Perfect," Cade said, studying the address on Google Street View. "Looks like a normal suburban house. Probably no security cameras." "Nice and isolated." Cade stood up, his fists clenched. "This ends tonight. She thinks she can ruin our lives and just walk away. It's time to show her what real consequences look like." "What if she calls the police?" Leo asked, a sudden wave of nervousness washing over him. "She won't get the chance," Cade replied coldly. "We do this quick and clean. Get our answers, make our point, and leave." "What if her parents wake up?" Ryder wondered. "Then we improvise," Cade said. "But one way or another, this stops tonight." The three boys spent the next hour meticulously planning their confrontation, driven by desperation and the dangerous, flawed logic of cornered animals. "Remember," Cade said as they prepared to leave, "we're not there to hurt her. We're there to get the truth and make sure she knows the price of crossing us." "Right," Ryder agreed. "Just a conversation. A very serious conversation." Leo nodded, trying desperately to convince himself that they weren't about to do something they would all regret for the rest of their lives. Nia had developed a routine of taking evening walks around her neighborhood, partly for exercise and partly to clear her head after the immense stress of the past few weeks. Her father had encouraged it, saying that maintaining normal activities was crucial for psychological health during ongoing operations. On Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m., she set out on her usual route through the quiet, tree-lined suburban streets. The sun had set an hour ago, and most families were settling in for the night. Street lights cast long, distorted shadows between the houses, and the only sounds were the muffled murmur of distant television shows and the occasional car passing on the main road. She was 3 blocks from home, walking past Riverside Park, when she heard the distinct sound of a car engine slowing down behind her. Nia's training kicked in instantly. She didn't turn around, but instead used her peripheral vision and the reflection in a parked car's window to assess the potential threat. A dark pickup truck was crawling along the curb, perfectly matching her pace. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. When you're being followed, never let them choose the location of the confrontation. Either lose them or force the encounter on your terms. The park offered too many hiding spots and no witnesses. It was better to stay on the street where porch lights and potential help were nearby. She picked up her pace slightly, heading toward the next intersection where she could turn back toward the safety of her home. The truck's doors slammed shut behind her. "Hey, Nia," she recognized Cade's voice immediately. Her pulse spiked, but she kept walking, pulling out her phone to call her father. "Don't even think about it." Ryder's voice came from her right side. He had circled around through the park and was now blocking her path to the intersection. Leo appeared from behind a parked car on her left, completing the triangle. They had planned this ambush carefully. "We need to talk," Cade said, approaching her from behind. "And this time, Daddy's not here to protect you." Nia stopped walking and slowly turned to face them, keeping all 3 in her line of sight. The nearest house was 50 yards away, and its porch light was off. There were no witnesses. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "We want answers," Cade replied, stepping closer, his face a mask of rage. "We know you're behind everything that's happened to us." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop lying!" Ryder's face was flushed with anger. "First, Cade gets busted for drugs right after we teach you a lesson. Then I get caught selling vapes. You think we're stupid? I think you got yourselves in trouble, and now you need someone else to blame." Leo's voice shook with a mixture of fear and anger. "You destroyed their lives? Cade lost his scholarships. Ryder's facing charges. What did we ever do to deserve this?" "Actions have consequences," Nia replied calmly. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you put your hands on me." The words hit like a physical blow. Cade's expression darkened with recognition. "So you admit it. You've been planning this whole thing." "I admit that bullies eventually face justice, one way or another." Ryder took another aggressive step forward, his fists clenched. "Justice? You think ruining our futures is justice for some stupid prank?" "Stupid prank?" Nia's calm facade finally cracked slightly. "You humiliated me in front of half the school. You tore my uniform. You made me feel powerless and afraid." "Good," Cade snarled. "Maybe now you understand how we feel. The difference is you chose to be bullies. I chose to fight back." "Well, congratulations," Ryder said. "You won. We're all screwed. Happy now?" "Not yet." The admission hung in the air like a direct challenge. Cade's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What else do you want from us?" "I want you to understand that there are people in this world you can't intimidate. People who won't be victims just because you think they should be." Leo stepped forward, his face twisted with desperation. "We get it, okay? You're tough. You're smart. You beat us. Can we just call it even now?" "Even?" Nia's voice rose slightly. "You think this is even? You 3 against one girl, cornering me in the dark like a pack of cowards." "We're not cowards." Ryder exploded, lunging toward her. Nia was ready. She sidestepped Ryder's clumsy charge and drove her elbow sharply into his ribs as he passed. He stumbled, gasping for breath, and she immediately pivoted to face Cade, who was rushing her from behind. Her father's training took over completely. Strike fast. Strike hard. Create distance. Cade reached for her, but Nia ducked under his arms and drove her fist deep into his solar plexus. As he doubled over, she brought her knee up toward his face, but he managed to twist away at the last second. Leo tried to grab her from the side, but Naya spun and caught his wrist, using his own momentum to flip him over her hip. He hit the asphalt hard, crying out in pain. Ryder had recovered and came at her again, this time more cautiously. He was bigger and stronger, but Nia was faster and better trained. She feinted to the left, then struck to the right, her palm connecting with his nose with a sharp, sickening crack. Blood spurted as he staggered backward, dazed. Cade, still winded but absolutely furious, pulled something from his pocket. A knife. "Enough games," he gasped. "You want to play war? Let's play war." The blade gleamed menacingly under the streetlight as he advanced toward her. Nia's mind went crystal clear. Every lesson her father had taught her about weapon defense came flooding back. "Cade, don't!" Leo called out from the ground. "This is crazy." But Cade was beyond reason, driven by a potent cocktail of desperation and rage. He lunged with the knife, aiming for her midsection. Nia caught his wrist with both of her hands, using his forward momentum to redirect the blade away from her body. She twisted sharply, applying immense pressure to his thumb joint until he cried out in agony and dropped the weapon. Before he could recover, she drove her knee hard into his stomach and followed with a swift uppercut that snapped his head back. Cade collapsed to the ground, semi-conscious and bleeding. 3 opponents down in less than 30 seconds. Nia stood over them, breathing hard but otherwise unharmed, as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. These boys had cornered her in the dark with a knife, and she had beaten all 3 of them. In the distance, she heard sirens approaching. Someone had called the police. It was time to face the consequences, all of them. The first police cruiser arrived within 3 minutes, its flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness of the suburban street. Officer Martinez stepped out, her hand resting cautiously on her weapon as she assessed the chaotic scene. 3 teenage boys on the ground in various states of injury. 1 girl standing calmly nearby, and a knife glinting on the asphalt. "Nobody move," she commanded. "Hands where I can see them." Nia raised her hand slowly. "Officer, my name is Nia Wallace. These 3 boys cornered me, and one of them pulled a knife. I defended myself." Ryder was sitting up, blood streaming from his broken nose. "She attacked us. We were just trying to talk to her." "With a knife?" Officer Martinez asked, pointing to the weapon near Cade's unconscious form. "That's not ours," Leo protested, struggling to his feet with a pained grimace. "She must have planted it." A second cruiser arrived, followed quickly by an ambulance. Officer Martinez's partner, Deputy Collins, began securing the scene while paramedics checked on Cade, who was groggily regaining consciousness. "I need to call my father," Nia said calmly. "You're not calling anyone until we sort this out," Officer Martinez replied. "What happened here?" "They followed me from my house and cornered me. They threatened my family earlier this week, and tonight they came to make good on those threats." "That's a lie?" Ryder spat blood onto the sidewalk. "She's been setting us up for weeks. She got Cade arrested, got me busted for selling vapes, and now she's trying to frame us for assault." Deputy Collins looked up from where he was photographing the knife. "This matches the description of a blade stolen from Archer Construction's garage last week. The family reported it missing." Cade's eyes went wide as he sat up against the ambulance bumper. "I didn't steal anything. Someone's been planning this." At that moment, Commander Wallace's truck roared around the corner. He had been monitoring police scanners and recognized his daughter's name in the dispatch. He parked quickly and approached the scene, his military bearing evident in every single step. "Sir, this is a crime scene," Officer Martinez warned. "That's my daughter," he replied, pulling out his ID. "Commander David Wallace, retired Navy SEAL. What's her status?" "She appears uninjured." "She claims she was attacked by these 3 boys. Commander Wallace surveyed the scene with professional, experienced eyes. 3 larger opponents down, his daughter standing calmly, a weapon that clearly didn't belong to her on the ground. Pride and concern warred in his expression. "Nia, are you hurt?" "No, Dad, I'm fine." "Did you follow protocol?" "Yes, sir. I tried to avoid confrontation, called for help when I couldn't, and used the minimum necessary force when I was cornered." Officer Martinez frowned. "Protocol? What kind of protocol?" "Self-defense training," Commander Wallace explained. I've been teaching my daughter basic protection techniques ever since these boys started harassing her at school. Harassing her? How? Before Nia could answer, Ryder exploded. This is insane. She's been destroying our lives. Cade lost his college scholarships because of her. Because he brought drugs to school, Nia replied evenly. Drugs you planted. Prove it. Deputy Collins stepped forward. We're going to need everyone to come down to the station for statements. This is a complex situation with multiple allegations. My daughter won't be answering any questions without a lawyer present, Commander Wallace said firmly. Dad, it's okay. I have nothing to hide. Cade struggled to his feet, supported by a paramedic. You hear that? She has nothing to hide because she planned everything perfectly. Planned what, exactly? Officer Martinez asked. Getting revenge on us for putting her in her place at school? The words hung in the air like a blatant admission of guilt. Commander Wallace's expression hardened. So you admit to targeting my daughter at school? Leo, realizing Cade's colossal mistake, tried to backtrack. It wasn't like that. It was just normal high school stuff? Normal? Nia's voice carried a sharp edge of anger for the first time. Shoving me into a mud puddle and tearing my uniform in front of everyone was normal? You didn't belong on our team, Ryder shouted. You never belonged at our school. Officer Martinez exchanged a knowing glance with her partner. The racial undertones of the boys' statements were becoming impossible to ignore. I think we need to have some very serious conversations downtown, she said, her voice now cold and official, about harassment, assault with a deadly weapon, and civil rights violations. Civil rights? Leo's voice cracked with panic. Targeting someone because of their race is a federal crime, son. And from what I'm hearing, that's exactly what happened here. The three boys looked at each other with a growing, dawning horror as the full legal implications began to sink in. What had started as harassment over a cheer squad position was now potentially a federal hate crime investigation. Commander Wallace placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. Officer Martinez, my daughter has been documenting this harassment for weeks. We have evidence of escalating threats and direct racial targeting. Tonight was the inevitable culmination. We'll need to see that evidence. You'll have it within the hour. As the boys were loaded into separate police cars, Nia finally allowed herself to take a deep breath. The physical confrontation was over, but the real battle for justice was just beginning. The weeks following the arrest transformed Nia's life in ways she never could have anticipated. What had started as a personal fight for dignity and safety became a national conversation about bullying, racial harassment, and justice in American schools. The first major shift came when the FBI opened a federal hate crime investigation. Agent Sarah Kim arrived at the Wallace house 3 days after the attack, her badge and serious demeanor making the stakes crystal clear. The knife attack was just the culmination, Agent Kim explained to Nia and her father in their living room. We've been building a case around the systematic harassment based on race. This goes beyond assault. It's a federal civil rights violation. Commander Wallace nodded grimly. What do you need from us? Everything. Every text message, every social media post, every witness statement. We're going to build an airtight case that sends a message. Meanwhile, the three boys' families were scrambling to manage the escalating crisis. Cade Archer's father hired Harrison Wells, the most expensive criminal defense attorney in the state, for a retainer of $50,000. Ryder Braxton's family mortgaged their house to afford legal representation. Leo Finch's mother worked extra shifts at the hospital to pay for a public defender. The media attention began with a local news report, but exploded when the video of the fight surfaced. Someone's Ring doorbell camera had captured the entire confrontation, showing three large boys cornering one girl, Cade pulling a knife, and Nia systematically defeating all three of her attackers. Teen girl fights off racist attackers, screamed the national headlines. Cable news programs ran the footage on a continuous loop. Social media exploded with an outpouring of support for Nia and outrage at the boys' actions. 2 weeks after the arrest, CNN's Anderson Cooper interviewed Nia and her father in their living room. Nia, when those three boys cornered you that night, what was going through your mind? Cooper asked. That this was what my father had been preparing me for, Nia replied calmly. Not the fight itself, but the moment when I had to choose between being a victim or standing up for myself. Commander Wallace, you taught your daughter to fight. Do you have any regrets about that? David Washington's expression was made of steel. My only regret is that it was necessary. But I would rather have a daughter who can defend herself than one who suffers in silence. The interview drew 20 million viewers and sparked national debates about self-defense, parental responsibility, and systemic racism in schools. Back in Northgate, the community was deeply and bitterly divided. Many residents supported Nia and praised her courage. Others believed the boys were being unfairly prosecuted for what they called typical teenage behavior. The school district found itself under federal investigation. Principal Croft was placed on administrative leave, pending a full review of how the harassment was handled. Coach Reynolds was fired immediately when investigators discovered that he had been aware of the boys' behavior and had failed to report it. 3 months into the legal process, plea negotiations began in earnest. The evidence against the boys was overwhelming: text messages planning the attack, social media posts filled with racial slurs, witness testimony about months of harassment, and the damning ring camera footage showing the assault. Cade Archer's attorney, Harrison Wells, met with District Attorney Rebecca Chen in her office on a rainy Tuesday morning. "My client is willing to plead to simple assault," Wells offered. "No hate crime charges. He serves 18 months and this all goes away quietly." Chen laughed coldly. "Your client brought a knife to attack a 16-year-old girl because of her race? We have him on video. The plea is assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and federal hate crime violations. 4 years minimum." That's his entire future? He should have considered that before he decided to terrorize a child. Wells tried a different approach. What if he makes a public apology? Shows remorse? Has he shown remorse? Wells was quiet for a long moment. He's struggling with the situation. Agent Kim intercepted his jailhouse calls yesterday. He called Miss Wallace the N-word 6 times and promised to finish the job when he gets out. Does that sound like remorse to you? The attorney's face fell. His client's case had just become hopeless. Similar conversations played out with Ryder's and Leo's lawyers. Ryder's communications were full of violent fantasies about revenge. Only Leo showed genuine remorse, writing letters of apology, and actively participating in racial sensitivity counseling. The community pressure intensified as the trial date approached. Northgate High's football program was suspended for the entire season. The school board held emergency meetings to draft new anti-harassment policies. Property values in the district began declining as families considered moving away from the negative publicity. Cade Archer's family felt the economic impact most severely. Archer Construction lost 3 major contracts when clients refused to work with the company. Cade's mother, who had worked as a real estate agent, found clients unwilling to be represented by the mother of that racist boy. Ryder Braxton's father was laid off from his construction job when the company decided his association with the case was bad for business. His mother increased her hours at the local diner, but the family was facing bankruptcy. Leo Finch's divorced mother struggled most of all. As a hospital worker, she faced constant questions and judgment from her colleagues. Several of Leo's extended family members cut off contact, ashamed to be associated with the case. The boys themselves were held in separate facilities to prevent the coordination of their stories. Cade, housed in the county adult lockup due to the weapons charge, quickly gained a reputation for his racist attitude and frequent disciplinary problems. Ryder, in the juvenile facility, spent most of his time in protective custody after several fights with other inmates who had seen the news coverage. Leo, also in juvenile detention, participated in counseling programs and wrote dozens of letters of apology that his lawyer hoped might influence his sentencing. 6 months after the attack, the media attention had led to a documentary deal, multiple book offers, and numerous speaking engagement requests for Nia. She turned them all down, focusing instead on her grades and her new role as student body president, a position she won in a landslide election. The plea agreements were finalized in February. Cade would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 4 years. Ryder would accept 3 years for his role as the primary enforcer, and Leo, with his cooperation and demonstrated remorse, would plead to 18 months in juvenile detention. The final court session took place on a cold March morning. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters, some supporting Naya and demanding justice, others claiming the boys were being unfairly punished. Media trucks lined the street for blocks. Inside, Judge Patricia Reynolds reviewed the case file one final time before the packed courtroom. She had served on the bench for 30 years, handling everything from white-collar fraud to murder cases. But the Northgate High hate crime case had drawn more attention than anything else in her career. We're here for the sentencing of defendants Archer, Braxton, and Finch, who have pleaded guilty to charges of assault, conspiracy, and federal hate crime violations, she announced. Nia sat beside D.A. Chen wearing a simple blue dress her mother had bought for the occasion. Behind her, Commander Washington watched with his usual military bearing, flanked by supporters from the school and the community. Chloe Bennett and several other cheerleaders had driven down to show their support. Across the aisle, the three boys sat with their attorneys, their families filling the rows behind them. Cade's parents looked aged by the stress and public humiliation. Ryder's family appeared financially and emotionally drained. Leo's mother wept quietly, having already lost her son to the justice system. D.A. Chen rose to deliver her final arguments. Your Honor, this case represents more than just teenage bullying gone wrong. The defendants engaged in a systematic campaign of racial harassment that culminated in a premeditated assault with a deadly weapon. The evidence shows months of planning, coordination, and escalating violence, all driven by hatred. She opened a thick folder. Text messages between the defendants refer to Miss Wallace as that N-word cheerleader and discuss various ways to get rid of her. Social media posts show them encouraging others to harass her. Witness testimony confirms they made her life miserable for months before the final attack. Harrison Wells, Cade's attorney, attempted damage control. Your Honor, my clients were confused, angry teenagers who made poor choices. They've already lost their college opportunities, their futures, their reputations. They've learned their lesson through these consequences. Have they? Chen countered, pulling out a new set of transcripts. Yesterday, we intercepted jailhouse communications where Mr. Archer refers to the victim using racial slurs and promises to finish what we started upon his release. Mr. Braxton has made similar statements about getting revenge. The courtroom murmured with disgust. Cade's father visibly sagged in his chair, realizing that his son had just sealed his own fate. Judge Reynolds studied the documents with a growing displeasure. Mr. Archer, stand up. Cade rose shakily, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the expensive varsity jacket he had once worn with such pride. In 30 years on this bench, I have seen many young people make mistakes and learn from them. But what you and your co-defendants did goes far beyond a teenage error. You targeted a fellow student because of her race. You escalated that harassment over a period of months, and you ultimately attacked her with a deadly weapon while making threats against her family. Wells tried to interrupt. Your Honor, if I may address— You may not, Judge Reynolds' voice cut like steel. Mr. Archer, you were the ringleader of this conspiracy. You planned the attack, you brought the weapon, and you led the assault. Your recent communications show no remorse, only continued racial hatred and threats of future violence. Cade's legs seemed to give out slightly. Please, Your Honor, I made a mistake. You made multiple mistakes over a period of months. With calculated, malicious intent and clear racial animus, she corrected him. Consulting her sentencing guidelines, I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with mandatory racial sensitivity counseling. You are permanently banned from all Northgate School District properties and are prohibited from contacting the victim or her family. Cade's mother burst into sobs behind him. His father sat stone-faced, staring at the complete and utter destruction of his son's future and his family's reputation. Mr. Braxton, stand up, Ryder rose, his hands visibly trembling. His family couldn't afford an attorney like Cade's, and his public defender looked overwhelmed by the federal attention. You were an active participant in this conspiracy. Your communications show that you encouraged violence. used racial epithets repeatedly, and physically participated in the assault. 3 years in state prison, 2 years of probation with the same counseling requirements and contact restrictions. Ryder's knees buckled slightly. His girlfriend, Haley, who had stood by him through the early stages, had broken up with him months ago when the jailhouse recordings became public. "Mr. Finch?" Leo could barely stand, his face pale and streaked with tears. Unlike his co-defendants, he had spent months in genuine remorse, writing letters, participating in counseling, and cooperating fully with investigators. "You were the follower in this group, but you participated willingly in racial harassment and assault. However, your cooperation with the investigation, your participation in counseling programs, and your demonstrated remorse distinguish your case." 18 months in juvenile detention, followed by 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service with racial justice organizations. Leo's mother wept with relief. 18 months was devastating, but it wasn't the years-long sentence she had feared. Judge Reynolds then turned to address the packed courtroom. "Let this case serve as a warning to every parent, every school administrator, and every young person watching. Hate crimes will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law in my jurisdiction." The defendants' futures were destroyed, not by their victims' response to their attacks, but by their own choices to engage in racially motivated violence. She looked directly at Nia. "Miss Wallace, would you like to make a victim impact statement?" Nia stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. The girl who had been shoved into a mud puddle 8 months ago was gone. In her place stood a young woman who had faced hatred head-on and had emerged stronger. "I didn't want any of this to happen," she began, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the silent courtroom. "I just wanted to make the cheer team, get good grades, and have a normal high school experience. These defendants took that choice away from me when they decided that I didn't belong in their world." She turned to face the 3 boys directly. "You thought you could intimidate me into disappearing. You thought your threats and your violence would make me quit and transfer schools. Instead, you taught me that standing up to bullies is the only way to stop them from hurting other people." Her voice grew stronger with every word. "I hope prison teaches you what empathy and common decency couldn't. I hope you learn that every single person deserves respect, regardless of their race. And I hope that when you get out, you spend the rest of your lives making up for the hatred you've spread." Cade's eyes blazed with an unrepentant fury. Ryder stared at the floor in shame. Leo looked genuinely broken by his remorse and the crushing consequences of his choices. "This court is adjourned." As the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted in controlled chaos. Reporters surged toward the exits to file their stories. The defendants were led away in handcuffs, their families following in various states of grief, anger, and devastation. Outside the courthouse, Nia and her father stood on the steps as cameras flashed around them and reporters shouted questions. "Miss Wallace, how do you feel about the sentences?" "Called a CNN correspondent. I feel like justice was served," Nia replied confidently. "These boys learned that actions have consequences, no matter who your family is, how much money you have, or what you think you're entitled to." What message do you have for other students facing harassment? Document everything. Tell trusted adults. And remember that you have the right to defend yourself and demand justice. Commander Washington wrapped his arm around his daughter's shoulders as they prepared to leave. "I'm proud of her for standing up for herself, and for every student who will never have to face what she faced because of her courage." As they walked toward their car through the crowd of supporters and media, Nia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she had carried for almost a year. The fight was finally over, and justice had prevailed. The real victory wasn't just the prison sentences or the vindication in court. It was the knowledge that she had faced hatred and violence with courage, intelligence, and determination, and had emerged victorious. 1 year later, Nia Wallace stood at the podium in Northgate High's newly renovated auditorium, addressing an assembly about anti-bullying and racial justice. The irony wasn't lost on her, speaking in the same school where 3 boys had once tried to destroy her for the color of her skin. "A year ago, I thought my biggest challenge would be learning cheer routines," she began, her voice carrying easily through the packed auditorium. "I never imagined I'd have to fight for my right to simply exist in this school without harassment." The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. In the front row sat Principal Williams, Croft's replacement, along with the new coaching staff and several new school board members. The old guard that had enabled the harassment was gone, replaced by administrators who were committed to creating a safer, more inclusive environment. "But I learned something important through all of this," Nia continued. "Bullies only have the power you give them. When you stand up for yourself and demand justice, they lose that power." After the assembly, Chloe Bennett found Nia in the hallway. Now the team captain, Chloe, had helped transform the cheerleading program into one focused on inclusivity and school spirit rather than on a toxic social hierarchy. "That was amazing," Chloe said, beaming. "Did you see how quiet everyone got when you talked about the knife?" "They needed to hear it," Nia replied. "Some people still think what happened to me was just boys being boys." "Not anymore. They don't. Not after seeing Cade Archer on the news last week." The news coverage had been devastating for Cade's image. He had been involved in another racial incident at the state prison, attacking a black inmate and earning himself additional charges. His original 4-year sentence had been extended to 7 years. The Golden Boy quarterback was now a career criminal with a white supremacist reputation. "Have you heard anything about Ryder?" Chloe asked. "He's been writing letters," Nia said. "Apologizing, asking for forgiveness. My dad thinks he might actually be changing." Ryder Knox had taken a different path in prison. After being beaten up by other inmates who recognized him from the news, he had requested protective custody and had begun participating in educational programs. His letters to Nia, which she read but did not respond to, showed genuine remorse and a growing understanding of his actions' impact. And Leo gets out next month. His mom says he wants to transfer schools and start over somewhere else. Leo Finch had served his full 18-month sentence and had completed his community service, working with racial justice organizations. Unlike his former friends, he had used his time and attention to educate himself about racism and its devastating effects. His transformation appeared genuine, though Nia remained cautious about trusting it. That evening, Nia found her father in the basement gym, working out as he did every night. The space had evolved since her training had begun. There was new equipment, photos of her various achievements, and framed newspaper clippings documenting their victory. "How did the assembly go?" he asked, pausing his workout. "Good. The kids are listening. Some of them shared their own stories about harassment afterward." Commander Washington smiled with pride. "You've become quite the speaker. Harvard's going to be lucky to have you." Nia had been accepted to Harvard with a full academic scholarship. Her application essay about overcoming racial harassment and standing up for justice had deeply impressed the admissions committee. She had also received scholarship offers from 12 other universities, all eager to recruit the young woman who had become a national symbol of courage and resilience. "I keep thinking about what you said that first night," she reflected, "about creating your own justice when the system fails. Do you regret it?" "Any of it?" Nia considered the question seriously. The past year had been incredibly difficult. She had received death threats from white supremacist groups, dealt with constant media attention, and endured the immense stress of testimony and court proceedings. But it had also brought unexpected rewards, deep friendships with students who admired her courage, respect from adults who had watched her handle adversity with grace, and the certain knowledge that she had helped create real, lasting change. "No," she said finally. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret fighting back." Her phone buzzed with a text from her guidance counselor. "News crew here wants an interview about the new anti-harassment policies. Interested?" "Another interview request," she told her father. "You don't have to keep doing them, you know." "You've already changed things here?" "I know. But maybe one more student will see it and realize they don't have to accept being treated badly." The changes at Northgate High had been comprehensive. The new administration had implemented zero-tolerance harassment policies, mandatory diversity training for all staff, and anonymous reporting systems for students. The football program had been rebuilt from scratch, with coaches who prioritized character over wins. The cheerleading squad now actively recruited from all demographics and focused on supporting the entire student body. Most significantly, the school district had hired Dr. Angela Foster, a nationally recognized expert on racial equity and education, as the new director of student safety and inclusion. Her first initiative was to create peer mediation programs and restorative justice circles for addressing conflicts before they could escalate. 2 weeks later, Nia received an unexpected visitor. Leo Finch stood nervously on her front porch, accompanied by his mother and a social worker. He looked different, thinner, more mature, with eyes that held genuine remorse rather than the desperate fear she remembered from the trial. "Nia, I don't expect you to forgive me," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong we were, how much we hurt you." She studied him carefully, seeing none of the arrogance or hatred that had driven him to participate in her harassment. Prison and counseling had changed him, but she remained cautious. "What do you want from me, Leo?" "Nothing. I just wanted to take responsibility for what I did and tell you that I'm sorry." "Really sorry?" His mother stepped forward. "I'm sorry too, Nia. I failed to raise my son with the values he needed. I'm so ashamed of what he did to you." The social worker nodded encouragingly. "Leo has completed extensive counseling and community service. He wants to dedicate his life to preventing what happened to you from happening to other students." "I'm transferring to Lincoln High," Leo continued, "starting fresh. But I wanted to make sure you knew that I understand now. What we did was evil, and you had every right to fight back." Nia looked at this broken boy who had once helped destroy her uniform and humiliate her in front of her peers. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a tired acknowledgement that justice sometimes looked like this, messy, incomplete, but real. "I hope you've really learned from this, Leo. I hope you spend the rest of your life making sure other kids never have to face what I faced." "I will," he said. "I promise." As they left, Nia felt a strange sense of closure. Not forgiveness, that would take much longer if it ever came at all, but a recognition that people could change, even after committing terrible acts. Standing in her doorway, watching Leo Finch walk away from her life forever, Nia reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this point. A year ago, she had been a girl just trying to fit into a hostile environment. Now she was a young woman who had proven that justice was possible, even when it seemed impossible. She had fought for her place in the world, and she had won. More importantly, she had made that place a little safer for everyone who would come after her. The battle was over. The victory was complete, and Nia Wallace was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.